All right, hi y'all. How's it going? So today what I'm going to do is go over my seed inventory process that I actually just came up with. I have never actually done a seed inventory process before. Years past, all I would do is literally run to the store and pick up some packets, come back home, check to see what I already had, and then kind of intermix everything and then go outside and plant stuff. So there was never really a process that actually helped me organize seeds going forward. I did start picking up my seed organizing process a little bit earlier in the years. I've had some help with inspiration from some videos such as like Garden Answer. They have been so great to be able to like help you keep organized and help your seed process stay clean and cut. With some thought, I was going through all these packets that I ended up getting this year, and I felt a little bit overwhelmed. I knew I needed to create some sort of process to help me keep track of things, just so that I didn't start losing trace of when I'm supposed to start some seeds and when I'm not supposed to start some seeds, what seeds are going to be started indoors versus which seeds can be direct sowed, so on and so forth. So I figured I would take you guys with me today and go over that inventory process really quick, and then just let you see kind of like the behind the scenes version of how I'm going to progress moving forward. So feel free, grab some coffee. This might be a little bit of a longer video just to give you a good idea of where I'm at. And then I think I'm going to go through some of the different seed packets that I ended up getting and show you on a spreadsheet what that ends up looking like, and then how I ended up creating these tables to make it a little bit more easy to filter through. So I guess let's just get started on this. All right guys, so here is my inventory spreadsheet. It's pretty easy. It's just able to be filtered through. So what I've basically done is put all of my plants in the first column. So in column A here, I have my variety set up next to them. So different variations of the description of what the plant is. I have their blooming season set up for the most part, just based on either the packets themselves or based on some of the information that I just know or have found online. Next, I just have quantity. I don't have that completed yet for everything, just because some of the packets don't actually have the amount that's included inside of each packet. So to keep an inventory, you actually need to figure all that stuff out. Not all packets will come with like 100 seeds, for example, and then not all packets will be 500 milligrams or 1 gram or 20 corms, so on and so forth. So everything's a little bit different here. I have to actually go back through all of the like locations. So for example, Eden Brothers and then Johnny's, to figure out exactly how much I did end up ordering. That's going to be a little bit time consuming. So I figured I would just keep that kind of blank for right now and then get back to it later. Next is my planting season, which is actually kind of important. So this is basically going to tell me when I need to start my plants indoors versus outdoors. All of the colors that you see up here that are set up, those actually equate to the planting season that is mentioned below. So as you can see, I have blue, green, like a light red orange, a pink, and then a just white. So each of these different colors will equate to the different times and is basically where the filter is set up. So anything that is the soonest that I need to plant immediately or as soon as possible, that is going to be at the very, very top. So something that's going to take a little bit longer before it's able to be transplanted outdoors, or something that's just going to be a little bit of a longer plant period. Then I have a cycle here as well. So annual, biennial, or perennial is basically all that should be in this column. Next is cold stratification. So it is a process that some plants do require. So ranunculus do require you to soak your corms for 3 to 4 hours beforehand. It's not really a cold stratification process, more so just a special note that I wanted to keep in mind. So I did put it in the cold stratification process column. Some of the other ones that do require it, for example, Rudbeckia says that you do need a cold stratification process. And then same thing with the foxglove plants too. So different variations or varieties have different cold stratification periods. So that's something to just keep in mind whenever you're going through your inventory. And I wanted to kind of have a special note for that. So I did create a cold stratification column. You don't need it in order to know. All of the information should be provided on your seed packets, or places like Google are very, very easy to gather that information. So something that you can look up, but I wanted a place that I could store that information, so that is why I created this spreadsheet. Next column is based on your sun. So some plants require full sun, some plants require full or part sun, some plants require part shade, some plants require full shade, so on and so forth. So I wanted a column for that as well, so that I knew what I was working with. Finally, my last column is the sowing column. So this is just going to be either indoors or direct sow. So anything that's going to be planted indoors, I really need to start paying attention to those a little bit more, because those are things that are going to need some time to grow before I'm able to transplant them outside. A lot of the plants that you start indoors will need to harden up as well. So the seedlings will need to kind of go through a little bit of a process where you just get them familiar with the outside environments whenever it gets a little bit warmer out, before you end up planting them outside or in the ground. So this is just a column that I need to keep in mind too. So my biggest columns that I want to pay attention to are my planting columns and then my sowing columns. Okay, so the next section that I really would like to talk about is basically how I organized everything. So as you can see down here, I have some tabs that are set up. So I have a tab for flowers, I have a tab for sunflowers, I have a tab for zinnias, herbs, pumpkins and squash, tomatoes and vegetables. I don't really have, there isn't an exact way to do this or an exact science to how you can organize all of this stuff. It's just I kind of based everything off of how many flowers I have. So I have a ton of sunflowers and I have those organized separately. I have a ton of zinnias, I have those organized separately. Pumpkins and squash, I have quite a few different pumpkins and squash, and then same with tomatoes. So instead of putting all of the tomatoes, all of the pumpkins into the vegetables, and then all of the sunflowers and all of the zinnias into the flowers, I ended up just separating those out just so I can pay attention to those in an inventory standpoint going forward. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how I set everything up. So the biggest thing is that I wanted to create a table that was going to be easy for me to filter through. So what I did was I created a table. So if you don't know how to do that, or you're not very familiar with the Microsoft process, there are a lot of tutorial videos online that can help you with all of that. But to make things easier, I set up my columns and my information first on how I wanted to organize things. So just to give you an idea, let's say that I wanted to do a new kind of table. So you don't have to follow this, but let's just say that I typed in all of this information in here, and I want to set up a new table. So all I would have to do is highlight everything that I have typed in already, go to Insert, select Table, and then as you can see, these are the headers that I want to use for all of my tables. So all of my plants, I'm going to put them, all of the different types of plants, I'm going to put them under this column that says plant. All of the different descriptions, I want to put them under the column that says variety, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to check the box that says my table has headers and click OK. So now you have a table that's already put in here. So on the right hand side, or sometimes it's in the center if you have your Excel set up a little bit differently, but there are different ways that you can filter through or set up a different type of table. So to make things easy on myself, I like to have clean lines. So I want my table to have kind of this type of look. And I know I'm going to be coloring all these cells in depending on the time of year that I need to start sowing all of my seeds. So the first thing that I'm going to do, let's say that I typed in sunflower let's say Pro Cut Red. Say the blooming period is summer to fall. Say that I had 100 seeds per packet. Let's say that I'm going to, how do I want to do this? Let's say that I'm going to plant them in spring. And their cycle is usually annual. They don't require a cold stratification period. They do like a lot of sun, and you can actually direct sow sunflower seeds directly into the ground. So let's say that this is the first row that I want to set up. So as you can see, my column says spring here. Now you can create different, like a key basically for yourself. So let's say that all of my plants under here that I want to input, I want them to all be the same color just because they all have the same planting period. So like, let's say I have 4 different sunflowers here. They're all going to be planted around the same time in the spring. So I'm going to highlight all 4 of those rows and all of the columns with it with the same exact color. So let's say that I have the same thing, but I have a Pro Cut, I don't know, or let's say that I have a teddy bear. Let's say that I only received 50 seeds this time. But you can see that the planting cycle was exactly the same, so they were set up in the spring. So I'm going to highlight all of this information, and I'm going to choose the color that I want for that planting season. So let's say that I want to do blue, and on the side here, I'm going to say that blue is equal to a spring planting time. So let's say that I have another sunflower. Oh, let's say that it's Autumn Beauty, for example. Maybe this. Let's say that I need to plant this one 4 to 6 weeks. Before I want to put them outside. So because I'm going to be planting them before I'm putting them in the ground, that would be an indoor start for me. So I'm going to start those indoors. So instead of this column being blue, I want to note the difference between the 4 to 6 weeks versus the spring. So I'm actually going to highlight this and change the color. So let's say I want to change it to pink. So I'm going to say that cell is going to equal 4 to 6 weeks. So whenever I start filtering through all of this information, all of this, the blue, anything that's highlighted in blue should be planted right around the same time. Anything that's highlighted in pink should all be planted around the same time, and so on and so forth. I'm going to delete this tab so that I don't lose my place everywhere else. So going back to what I've already created. As you can see, I've created the code or the key up at the very top. So this is just for me so that I can easily filter through all of this information. There are ways to keep all of these rows in place so that anything underneath the top here, see how I'm moving my cursor down, but these rows are staying all the same? That's called freezing your rows. So as I'm scrolling down, everything stays up here, but all of the information down below is going to change. So let me explain or show you how this works. So going back to my seed box that we had set up a little bit ago, I will show you what I did. So as I ended up getting a seed packet in, what I did was I went to my seed inventory tracker, which is this here, so my spreadsheet, and I would basically put in everything that I found on the seed packet that I really needed to pay attention to. So as you can see here, these are amaranth. The variety is going to be velvet curtains. The days are 65 to 75. And the amount in the packet is about 100 seeds. On the back of the packet is a lot more information about how you're supposed to plant your seed. So as you can see up here in culture, it says transplant, sow 4 to 6 weeks before last frost. Further down, there's another method on if you wanted to plant the seeds directly into the ground. And then down here, it goes to light and soil requirements. So it says sun and average, well-drained soil. So I'm basically saying that this packet requires sun. So then I would take this information and I would go to my spreadsheet and I would input that information. So I will show you where that was inputted in here. So line 23 shows where all of that was inputted. So amaranth, velvet curtains, 65 to 75 days for the bloom period. There were 100 seeds in this packet. The planting period indoors was 4 to 6 weeks. These are an annual. There isn't any cold stratification required. And they require sun. And you can plant them. My planting method is going to be indoors. But like I said, if you chose to plant your seed directly outdoors, you could and direct sow them. There is a method for that too. So as you can see, let me show you another one. Here's a good one. Okay, so that packet was from Johnny's. This is Eden Brothers. So this is the Foxglove Seeds, the Alba variation. So as you can see, there's the life cycle at the top left. Your bloom period is in your bloom time. Your sowing method is listed there as well, along with light requirements, your planting time, and then a little bit more about the plant itself. Your descriptions are down here as well. And then also you have your cold stratification period listed here too. There isn't any information on the back of the seed packet. However, they do include a QRC code where you can scan in with your phone and it can pull up the information on their website. And there's a little bit more details about the plant there as well. So I'll show you where I inputted all of this information. So line 34, highlighted below, shows the foxglove plant. Alba was the variety. And your bloom period was spring to summer. Your quantity, this seed packet actually didn't show how much was included here. So this is a good example of one where I'll have to go to Eden Brothers website where I was able to place an order for this product and just see if I can find the quantity listed there. Your planting period is either spring or fall. It is a biennial plant. For us here, because I'm in zone 5B, it will likely be more of like an annual for us. They do require a cold stratification period. Eden Brothers also has some details on your cold stratification process. Sometimes you can stick your plants in the freezer, the fridge to give it a little bit of a shock or to help the germination process a little bit more. They do require sun, and then you're going to direct sow this one. So that was the basic process on how I inputted all of this information into the spreadsheet. Going into sunflowers, because the bloom period and the planting period were all very similar and the sowing method was going to be the same, all of this was going to follow the direct sow method. So there's no highlighting down here required. For zinnias, I have quite a different amount of varieties in here. So I have my Cupcakes Pink Mix, I don't know how to say it, but I think it's Pumila Salmon, Illumination, Queen Lime Red, Senorita, Sahara, Double Raspberry Ripple, Cinderella Lilac, and then the Cinderella Peach. Your bloom period is basically all of my seed packets said summer, but around 75 to 90 days. You can plant them indoors. They do recommend it about 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost. Their cycle is all annuals, no cold stratification required. They do all like the sun very much, and then I am starting all of those seeds indoors. So going to the herbs, I have different plants. I have a couple different basils, rosemary, chives, hyssop, lavender, oregano, spearmint, thyme, cilantro, dill, and parsley. This is my first year that I'm going to actually be growing herbs. I've never grown them before, so we're going to give it a shot and just see how it goes. So the planting periods are 8 to 10 weeks for the rosemary, 4 to 6 weeks for the majority of the plants, and then cilantro, dill, and parsley will be started in the spring whenever you can direct sow those outside, so I won't have to really worry about them. The majority of them are annuals. Oregano, spearmint, and thyme were noted as being perennials. None of them require cold stratification to get started. And then they do require full sun, and the methods of sowing will be indoors or direct sow depending on when I'm starting the planting period. Pumpkins and squash. So as you can see here, I have a couple pumpkins and then a few different squash listed. A bunch of different varieties of each. Blooming periods do vary along with your planting season. So the majority of them, we're going to start them around the end of June or early July, just to make sure that we have enough time to be able to get some pumpkins and some squash so that we can harvest those around October time. That's usually whenever you want to see some of those pumpkins. So hopefully they'll be good once I cut those off the vine. Pumpkins usually stay good as long as you have them stored away in the right environment for about 3 to 4 weeks. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get through all of October with an end of June and early July period. Some of them will be a little bit shorter, but this should take us to about the end of the first week and beginning to middle of the second week of October. So here's, they are an annual, so all of them listed will be an annual. They do not require a cold stratification period. They do like full sun, and you can directly sow them in the ground, or you can start them indoors. I think I'm going to actually start mine indoors and just see how they do. I've heard that pumpkins and squash have a really hard time getting started outside if you're not really careful with how your watering is. So I thought the best way for me to kind of watch all of that would be to start them indoors. Moving on to tomatoes. So I think my list of tomatoes is pretty short, which is probably pretty good. I decided that what I want to do this year is not plant as many different varieties of tomatoes, but plant more of the same types of varieties. So I have a Big Beef Plus, I have a Brandywine, a San Marzano, Sun Gold, and then a Wisconsin 55. As you can see, the bloom periods vary between the different plants. Planting periods were all pretty much the same, so they were very generally 5 to 6 weeks before your first or your last frost. So we'll keep that in mind. The cycles are all annuals, so tomatoes don't usually grow the next year. You're gonna have to take those out after they have, after you've harvested everything for the year and they have died out from the frost. They do not require a cold stratification process. They do require full sun, and you can plant them indoors. Okay, so the next tab that I have for you are vegetables. So this one's a pretty thorough tab as well. We have quite a few different vegetables. We had quite a few different flowers as well. So that's expected because we are going to have about 15, 16, 17, 18. We're going to have about 18 different raised garden beds, which is wonderful, and I'm really excited about it. So hopefully it goes as well as I'm hoping. So the timelines are 3 to 4 weeks indoors, 4 to 6 weeks indoors, 6 to 8 weeks indoors, 8 to 10 weeks indoors, 10 to 12 weeks indoors, and then spring, fall plant periods, and then direct sow. Just wanted to let you guys know, the colors don't have to be exactly the same. I just liked the way that this was set up because they were all clearly different from each other, so there was nothing that really looked similar or closer, too close not to be able to tell the difference. So the earliest things that I'm going to have to pay attention to are celery and onion. Those will need to be started first. Those are about 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost, and then you're going to start them indoors. The different variations of celery that I ended up getting were Pascal and then Tall Utah. And then for onions, I ended up getting Red Grano and Walla Walla Sweet. I've heard nothing but good things about the Walla Walla Sweet, so I'm actually really excited to try to grow those. I have never grown onions before, so we're gonna give it a shot. I am gonna start all of those or each of those indoors, and then end up transplanting them outside to be put into the ground. Next will be our pepper plants. So as you can see here, we have quite a few different peppers. They're all going to be started around the same exact time, about 6 to 8 weeks. Their bloom period does vary, but most of the time it's in the summer. I haven't put that information in yet just because I wanted to make sure that I was correct by saying summer. I was just trying to think of years past when I've done peppers, and I feel like I do get some that pop up in the late spring, and then I will get some that have bloomed all the way into like fall where I can harvest them in the fall. So I just wanted to double check on that and go directly to the websites for those. Again, all my vegetables are actually going to be annual, so I'll probably skip over that column going forward. And then same thing here, none of them required cold stratification, so all of those will say no. All of my vegetables also, I think, are full sun, yep. And then my peppers, I'm going to actually start those indoors. Next are the beets. So I have 3 different variations for beets. I still can't pronounce this name. I think it's Shogia, I don't know. Guards Mark, Detroit Dark Red, and then Red Ace. So the bloom periods are different, but kind of in the same realm. So they'll be all planted 4 to 6 weeks from each other. Again, I'm going to be starting those indoors. I only did 2 different types of Brussels sprouts this year. I've actually done the Long Island Improved before, and I've had really good luck with them. So I wanted to add something else in there too. So I am doing the Gladius. It says about 98 days for bloom period, but I think ours is actually going to be a little bit longer because of how hot sometimes our summers get, which is so weird because we are in zone 5B, but our winters get fairly chilly. So I think that this is going to be a little bit longer than 98 days, but it should be okay. They do require 4 to 6 weeks before I plant them outside, so I will be starting those indoors. Going on to cucumbers, I ended up doing 3 different types of cucumbers. So I did the Diva, the Mercator, and then the Sashimi. So the Sashimi I think was new this year. I was really excited about it because it looks like it's kind of like a Japanese, like longer cucumber, and it's really skinny. But I've heard they're really, like they have a lot of like substance in there. So instead of like the gushy seeds on the inside, it's more of like the actual like meaty part of it. So I wanted to give that one a shot. They do require 4 to 6 weeks indoors before you plant them outside in full sun. Going into the watermelon category, so I'm not sure where I'm going to plant the watermelon. I don't actually have a bed mapped out for them, or maybe I do. I can't remember if I did or not, but that one's still a little bit pending. I'm not sure if I'm going to do watermelon or not. I got really excited because they had sugar babies, which sounded really good. And then this tender sweet orange has like a orange flesh on the inside instead of like a red. So I wanted to give that a shot too. And then Cal Sweet, the description just sounded really good, so I figured I would try that out. They do require 4 to 6 weeks indoors before I plant them outside. Okay, so going into the broccoli category. So broccoli is a cool season plant. So I need to make sure that I'm getting these kind of started because they'll grow fairly quickly, like within 58 to I think 80 days. So that's a pretty, that's fairly quick. So I'm gonna actually start those 3 to 4 weeks before my last frost. And then I'm gonna plant those indoors. The different varieties that I ended up getting were the Gypsy, the Imperial, and then the Waltham. Now going into the lettuce, I only did 2 different types of lettuce. So there's Butter Crunch and then there's Starfighter. I think I want to go back and try to get a few more different types of lettuce. I feel like we eat lettuce fairly often. Lettuce I think you can grow throughout the whole season too. So they're pretty quick to grow. You just have to keep on top of them. So I'm going to start those 3 to 4 weeks before the last frost indoors. Okay, so then I ended up getting 2 types of melons. So there's Hale's Best Jumbo and then there's Hannah's Choice. sweeter varieties for both of them. I think Hannah's Choice is more of like a cantaloupe, if I remember right. Both of those 3 to 4 weeks before the last frost, and then you can start them indoors. Now I'm on to parsnip. So as I mentioned, I think in one of my other videos, I've had such a hard time with parsnip. I don't know what it is or what I do differently, but I just think that I don't give them enough time to be able to get to their full extent. So maybe that's what it is, but I've heard that like parsnip are really difficult to try to get to germinate. So I'm hoping that if I start them indoors this year instead of outdoors, previous years I've always done outdoors first, that might help the plant germinate a little bit better. They do require 120 days of bloom period. I know that that's incorrect because I have had those things in the ground forever. So they do require 3 to 4 weeks before the last frost. And then, like I said, I'm going to try to plant them indoors and see how they go this year. On to carrots. So carrots, I ended up getting 3 different types. So I got the Rainbow Blend, Scarlet Nantes, and then the Tender Sweet. I've grown the Tender Sweet before. I didn't have much luck with it, so I kind of want to try it all again. I feel like I do a really bad job with carrots, but again, I just feel like I'm not giving them enough time to be able to grow. I wish I could just try to grow them overwinter them as well. So I might try that at the end, like towards the fall time too, and just see if I can do that well. Again, we're gonna plant these in the spring. So whenever I just have spring here, like spring, fall, when I plant in the spring, I'm probably gonna plant right after, the last frost was noted from last year. So April 17th was our last frost period. So this year, I will probably plant like a week after April 17th just to make sure that the temperatures are pretty good. And then as long as like nighttime temperatures are above like 50 degrees or so, we should be okay. Same thing with the fall. So I will probably try to get those in the ground right before our first frost from the last year would have started. These ones are going to be direct sow. So I'm actually not going to be starting my carrots or my corn, my radishes, or my spinach inside. We're going to be starting those outside. So now onto corn. So I ended up only getting 2 variations. So I ended up getting the American corn and then the sugar buns. Both of those are an average of like 70 to 80 days. You can plant them in spring or in fall. So like I said, with the carrots, I'm probably gonna plant them a week after the last frost for springtime of last year. So a week after April 17th, direct sow those in the ground. 3 different types of radishes. So Champion, Cherry Belle, and then French Breakfast. Same thing, a week after April 17th in the spring. Direct sow those in the ground. And then finally spinach, Bloomsdale long standing. I've grown this one before. I always have success with spinach. I do pretty well with keeping them going all year round. So we should have like a spring to fall harvest for the most part with spinach. And especially because the location that I actually plant them in, they don't get a lot of hot heat. So they actually have a chance to take a break from the afternoon sun for a while. And I will be direct sowing these into the ground. Okay, so that's basically it for inventory. We've gone through each one of these tabs pretty briefly for some of them, but pretty more in depth for the others. I think the last thing that I'm going to do with you guys today is kind of go over the plans for the raised beds and just show you what our concepts are or what I'm kind of looking at doing for right now. It may change as we get a little bit closer to the spring period. So I'll get everything set up for showing you guys our raised garden beds, and then we'll move forward and close out the video. All right, you guys, so here is a general setup of how the raised garden beds that we want will be. So right now we currently have a spot for 3 raised garden beds that are about 8 by 4 foot. These garden beds will all be about the same size too, just depending. I haven't decided if I want to do 4 by 8s or if I want to do more of like the 3 by 6s. But regardless, I think this is the idea of where we're going to be at. As you can see, we have a couple of the L-shaped ones here. I'm not sure if we're going to keep these as L-shaped or if we're just going to do 2 separate. So we'll keep this as like a 4x8 and then move this to about a 4x4. I haven't decided yet. I think it's still a little bit early for me to decide too. So I will be making all of my raised garden beds this year. So I will be taking you guys along with me while I do that process too, and just show you how I do that and show you the type of tools that I end up using. But for now, I think we can just start digging into some of this stuff. So as you can see, I did have my watermelon and my melons here. I also have sweet potatoes listed. I do have some potatoes that will be coming in a little bit later, but I haven't gotten those in yet. So we'll see when we end up getting those in. I think they won't be delivered until April, and those will take a little bit longer for me to get going. So I will have to get those into the ground immediately after I get them in. I do have some carrots and some parsnips here, corn over here, pumpkins, celery and cucumbers, some peppers, some onions. I have a blank bed here still. I haven't figured out what I'm going to be putting in there. It might just be flowers, some tomatoes, some squash, and some dahlias here. As you can see along the top, I have zinnias and sunflowers down here. The idea is that around all of this, there will be a fenced in area along with a little bit of an opening. And then I think around the opening, I might do like an arbor or some sort of containers in there. And then maybe some containers kind of scattered throughout each of the different openings here. The walkways, I think, will be anywhere between 2 to 4 feet in between each of the beds. I also haven't decided about that yet. We'll see. I am thinking a black fence. I wanted to do a white fence because my other fence is white as well, but the black just looks so clean and sleek that I think I might end up just doing, getting like, I have more of my white fence, so I might just use that and then getting some more of that and then painting everything black. But still not sure yet. We'll see how that goes. And then I do have some chicken scratch down here about some of the calculations that I ended up doing just based on where I was going to source the wood. So the type of wood that I'll likely be using will be like a pressure treated instead of a chemically treated, a pressure treated wood. That's kind of the idea. Each of the, I guess I should say the height, so how tall the beds will be. Right now I have it at about 12 inches. I think I'm going to keep it around 10 to 12 inches. That way I can add on in the future if I want to. But right now I feel like that's a pretty good height for me to be able to get all of the plants in there substantially enough so that they'll be able to come up and grow. Around all of the raised beds, what I think I might end up doing is just sub-mulch. It's a little bit easier for me. My other garden bed is the same way, or my other raised garden bed is the same way, where I have mulch around it, and I have a little bit of a few stepping stones here and there throughout. And that worked just fine for me. I have no issues with it. It's a pretty easy system. Right now that garden bed doesn't have any drip on it, so I actually do walk my hose every single day, probably almost 100 feet out, to make sure that I can water those beds every single day as of the last few seasons. This season I am going to try to install drip into my old garden bed, my raised garden bed, and then also into this new one, just to see how the process works for both of those. All right, and I think that was it for our raised garden bed video. So let's put that over here. So I guess that's everything that we needed to talk about today. Thanks for tagging along and going with me for my inventory process and how I keep track of seeds. I hope that was helpful for some of you guys that kind of were like me and get a little bit overwhelmed with how many seeds that you ended up getting over the years. That actually doesn't include some of my older seeds from the last 2 years. A lot of those seeds probably are not very good anymore. I didn't have a very good storage process for them, so I might end up throwing a lot of those away or try growing a few in some containers kind of on the side with whatever extra soil that I may end up having. But for the most part, that was pretty much it. I hope that was a really good starting point for everybody too. And then I hope you guys liked my raised garden bed kind of proposal. Again, that's probably going to change. I'm not exactly sure what I really want to do, but for the most part, that's pretty much what I've come up with. I really like how it looks. I feel like it's very clean. There's some clean lines in there. Hopefully all the structures will look the same. It will give me a total of about 18 raised garden beds. Most of them are about the 4x8 size, and then others will be about 4x4 sizes. So some of those will require more like the vining type of products, or like my dahlias. My dahlias I'm going to have planted in there as well. My dahlias won't come in until a little bit later as well. I think those will come in around the time that the potatoes end up coming in too. So those I won't have to keep track of until a little bit later. Again, once we get those all set up, I'll make sure to go through all of those with you, unbox them, show you some pictures online of what they look like, and then move past it. I will have to create a few of the raised garden beds for my mom as well. She has decided that she wants to also do seeding with me as well. So I've set a few seeds aside for her. I think that she's going to like growing some peppers and I don't know what else she said. She said definitely peppers, maybe a few other plants. And then tomatoes. She would love to grow some tomatoes. So I have some extra seeds for her as well. And then she did ask for 2 raised garden beds. So I am going to make her 2 raised garden beds for their little backyard too. So I think that's going to be it for this video. I think the next video I'm going to do, we're going to actually start sowing some of our seeds indoors, setting all those up, getting those onto the actual shelving unit, and getting those grow lights going and on their cycles like they're supposed to be. And then we do have to set up our ranunculus, go through that whole process too, which involves a soaking for 3 to 4 hours, and then getting those into some soil, and then starting those up onto the shelving units as well. So I think we'll have a couple different days where we'll sit down and go through each of those separately and create different videos for each of those processes. So have a lot coming for you. Really, really excited about this year. I can't wait to share everything with everybody. So until then, I will just see you next time. Thanks. Bye.